All righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Oops, sorry. All right. So while we wait, we'll just let people trickle in. We have over 1,000 people who RSVP tonight, so we're super excited. For all these people who were so interested to learn more about transportation. But before we kick it off to Dana, who will be our amazing moderator tonight, I just want to welcome myself. I'm Stephanie Burgos Veras, organizing manager with the Riders Alliance. And so for those who are welcome, coming in, I'm just going to go over some logistics for tonight. So you probably all have received many emails from me about tonight. So first of all, thank you for opening them and thank you for actually coming here and being here tonight. We have a very packed agenda, so we have to dive right in. But tonight's, to just talk a little bit about the structure of tonight and what is available for everyone who's here. So tonight's program will be broken up into two sections. We'll have two 1-hour panels. And the first panel will run from 6:35 to 7:35, and it will be followed by a 5-minute break. And then we will give everyone the opportunity to go get a drink, go to the bathroom, and then we'll ask everyone to be back here by 7:40, and then we'll run until 8:40. And so just a few logistics and options that we have tonight. So we have two amazing interpreters tonight who will be providing American Sign Language, who will be visible throughout the forum. We'll also have Spanish interpretation. To be able to access the interpretation, there is an icon at the bottom of the screen. Once you click it, you'll be able to click Spanish and hear the interpretation. We will also have live captioning, and to access the streaming text, I will drop a link into the chat box where you can see all the live captioning throughout the event. As well, tonight our Facebook, our event will be, streaming on all of our partners' Facebook page. So, if you want to see it again, you can go to a Facebook. We'll be uploading it on YouTube after, so you can come back to this event multiple times. But not only will we be on Facebook, live streaming, a lot of our staff members also will be on Twitter, live tweeting everything that's happening and all the action for those who can't join us tonight and like to get their news from Twitter. I think many of us do. But while we're on Twitter, we're actually going to be using a very special hashtag that we hope that everyone who's on this webinar will also use. And the hashtag for tonight is Transpo Mayor 2021. That's how we're doing it tonight. So we're asking everyone, to please use Transpo Mayor 2021. But before I give it over to Dana, who has, a very packed agenda and a lot of great questions that have been informed by so many folks on this webinar tonight, this wouldn't be a grassroots event if we didn't have an icebreaker. So we'll have two icebreakers tonight. I'm going to do one, and then Dana's going to do the second one. The first one is a quick poll. Oftentimes people forget, what does the mayor actually control? Since we know that the governor and the state also have some control over our transit. So we'll have a quick poll to test just how much you know. And then for the second one, Dana will walk us through. But after she walks us through, we're asking everyone to take a picture of the icebreaker, post it on Twitter with our very fun hashtag TranspoMayor2021. And with that, I hope that tonight is informative, that it is fun and engaging. And we hope that there's a lot to take away, and that there's a lot of pictures, a lot of good tweets, and that we get to see a lot of the activity on social media with, once again, our very nice new hashtag TranspoMayor. So thank you so much. And I'm going to post the poll up. And then in a minute, I'll take it down and pass it over to Dana. All right. Great. So we'll leave it up for a minute, and then after, we'll get started for the good part. All righty. Okay. Let's see how well Civics 101, our crowd. What does the mayor actually have control over? All right, so a lot of people are saying, wow, this is an amazing crowd. We already have 400 people in this poll, so thank you. So we have a few more seconds before we close it. And for those who are just joining, we just put in the chat box how you can access live captioning. All right, so we're at 1 minute. So we have, I know there are more participants, but I know folks didn't come here for a poll. We came here to hear some answers. So I'm gonna end the poll and I'm going to share the results. And 12% of the crowd thinks that the mayor runs subway service, 21 that the mayor runs bus, 84 bus and bike lanes, 23% commuter benefits, 87 parking regulations, 56 scooters, city bike 71, fare student metro card is 48, ferry 52, bus shelters 48. Wow, I think we have a very smart crowd. All right, Dana, I think you're in good hands. So thank you so much, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. So thank you all for being here. I'm Dana Rubenstein from the New York Times, and this is a panel or forum on transportation in the mayor's race. There are a raft of hosts whose names I'll reel off now. There's Transportation Alternatives, Families for Safe Streets, the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, Riders Alliance, Regional Plan Association, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, StreetsPAC, Straphangers Campaign, New York League of Conservation Voters, and Transit Center. The sponsoring organizations would like you to know that they do not support or oppose any of the candidates for mayor. And with that, I will introduce the candidates briefly. Candidate responses will be limited to 60 seconds. We reserve the right to mute you, and we will conclude with a lightning round. So the first panel, assuming everyone is here, is Sean Donovan, the former HUD Secretary and Federal Budget Director, Diane Morales, a former nonprofit executive, Maya Wiley, former counsel to the mayor, and Andrew Yang, former presidential candidate. Hello.
Hey, Dana.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello, everyone.
Is everyone on? I can't really see.
Hi, it's Diane.
Hi, I see you. Hi, Sean.
Sean's on too. Hey, Dana.
Hi. Is Maya on? Or is she coming late?
Thought I saw her.
Yeah,
I
she
see
was
her
on
name,
earlier.
but not her video.
Okay, she might
Maybe
be
she's
running.
with her cat. That sometimes happen in these forums. There she is.
Oh, hello.
Oops, for some reason, it was not letting me in. I think it was because Sean wishes he had my cat.
Could be. All right, well, thank you all for being here. We're going to, before we begin the interrogation, we're going to do something a little unusual. We're going to begin with a scavenger hunt. So we'd like each of you to find quickly something that you use every day to get around town, like an emblem of your transportation know-how, be it a Metro card, a bike helmet, city bike key, car key, whatever, and then bring it back and show it to us. All right, let's see what everyone has in alphabetical order by last name. So Sean, what do you?
City bike, subways, we got it all right here. Didn't have to go far from my phone.
And Diane? Oh, Metro card, got it. And Maya, Metro card, and Andrew?
Metro card, though I have to say I've been bouncing between the Metro card and using a smartphone to pay. And then the mask, because the instructions said 3 things and I got a little bit conscientious. The graphic, not you. Your instructions were very clear, but then it's
All right, thank you. All right, so the first question is going to be asked by David Shepard. He's a founding member of Families for Safe Streets, a member of the Advisory Council for Transportation Alternatives, and he in 2019 lost his fiance on Baychester Avenue in the Bronx to a hit and run. David, are
Good
you
evening. Yes, I'm here. Good evening, all. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is David Shepard, as Dana said. Thank you, Dana. I'm a member of Families for Safe Streets, the club that no one wants to join. We have all either been injured or lost a loved one in a crash, and we confront the epidemic of traffic injuries and deaths through advocacy and support. Every 3 hours, someone is seriously injured or killed in New York City streets. And that doesn't include thousands of other crashes where injuries might not be may not be life-threatening. In 2009, on Thanksgiving Day, my loving fiance, Sonia Powell, as Dana mentioned, was killed crossing the street in the Bronx. She was a loving nurse who treated all of her patients with honor and distinction. At Families for Safe Streets, we share our stories so that no one will ever experience the pain and grief of losing a loved one. It's been 12 years for me, and that pain and grief continues to come back and affect me. But tonight, here's my question. How will you get Vision Zero back on track? During his mayoral run, Mayor de Blasio committed to eliminating traffic fatalities by 2024. New York City is clearly not on track to achieve this goal. And in fact, during COVID, as with the rest of the country, the number of people killed and seriously injured on our roadways has increased. Families for Safe Street members fought alongside street safety advocates for the passage of the Vision Zero design standard and street master plan. But these were never fully, were never funded or fully implemented. We urged the city to earmark speed camera revenue to fix our broken streets, but the city opposed this measure. As mayor, how will you get Vision Zero back on track? How will you get this critical function with proving engineering and other systems on track to save and to make the streets safer for all New Yorkers? Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Sean, would you like to answer first?
Sure. And you said 60 seconds?
Yes.
Dana? Okay. Well, first of all, David, let me just say thank you for sharing your story. It's heartbreaking, and you're absolutely right that this is a club that no one wants to join, and it should be a club that no one does join with the right leadership. And I think the fundamental problem from my point of view is that we have led too much with policing and enforcement and not enough with reimagining our streets for the 21st century. We're a 21st century city with 20th century streets. And I would really focus on the infrastructure that we need to calm traffic and slow traffic, to make sure that we are fundamentally making walking around this city, cycling around this city, so many other things with protected lanes and infrastructure that really does change the experience of walking and makes it safer. And I will say, we have the potential at this moment with the Biden-Harris administration to get a significant increase in investment in infrastructure to make it possible to accelerate that work and re-envision our streets. No one in this race is better positioned to work with that administration or everyone in Congress, given my deep experience in Washington.
Thank you, Sean. Diane?
Yes, David, thank you so much for sharing. My condolences on your loss. Unfortunately, my daughter is also a member of that club. Sammy, the little boy that was killed on Prospect Park West, was a camp friend of hers. So we feel your loss. So, you know, we've got to really work to take meaningful steps towards reducing reliance on cars in our city, because we know that that's the root cause behind traffic deaths. The majority of the cause lies there. And a city that is less reliant on cars is actually going to be safer for all of our people, whether we're talking about pedestrians or other cyclists or motorists. And so I think it's important for us to commit to revitalizing Vision Zero. And I would advocate for my agenda to reduce car reliance, which includes fighting for better subways, for bus corridors across the city, for the expansion of the Freedom Ticket and less expensive Metro North tickets. And we really have to focus on the public transit issue so that we can, in fact, reduce reliance on cars and prioritize doing so in underserved areas in our city, because we know also that there are particular areas that are more subject to transportation apartheid than others. And that includes expanding busways, bus lanes, and bike lanes as well. I think we also need to, I'm not keeping track of time.
It's about time to wrap up.
Okay. And so, I think we really need to encourage the completion and protection of greenways and other such things so that we are keeping our people safe. And that's what I would prioritize.
Thank you. Maya?
Thank you. And look, we have to recognize that safety is not only job one, and we all have a story. We had an 18-year-old kid killed in my neighborhood riding his bike by a minivan. And, this is something that can be fixed with design, but design in partnership with communities, because we also know that the design elements we need, right? We're talking about things like making sure we put speed bumps in the right place, making sure we have stop signs, using our lights and making sure we have our lights timed at intersections that we need them timed differently at. But we also know that enforcement is something that should not be held by the New York City Police Department, because when we design in partnership with community, we make communities safer, but we also make communities safer in the ways that community needs. And what I mean by that is it's not a one size fits all. Diane is absolutely right on public transportation and making sure we're solving transit deserts with more public transportation, but also making sure that we know where, because we do. It's 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, crossing 4th Avenue. Over here where I live, if you're coming off, the Prospect Expressway, folks are getting killed in that intersection. But that's the point, is what those design elements have to be localized. And that's having a mayor that will be in partnership with communities around what design makes sense for them, because it's not a one size fits all answer, but it is one that requires partnership with community.
Thank you, Maya. And Andrew.
Thank you, David, for your activism. I'm so sorry for your loss. There are a number of concrete things we can do to get Vision Zero back on track. First, we should examine reducing speed limits in places where people have been struck and badly injured and killed. The fact is the lethality of a vehicle can change dramatically based upon even 5 miles an hour. The second thing is we need to have automated enforcement in more of these areas where frankly there are people that are driving excessively fast. After you get ticketed by an automated camera, your behavior changes quickly. The third thing is that the NYPD should not be examining the sites of accidents after the fact. They frankly don't understand a lot of these issues. That should be moved to the Department of Transportation, that can then make recommendations to remediate what happened with that accident. We should be seeing every accident as both a tragedy and an opportunity to learn where we're failing in terms of our infrastructure. The fourth thing is that when I was with StreetsPAC and was at the site of a tragic bike accident, it was a private truck that ran over this boy. And some of the private carting companies, frankly, have incentives that are going to lead drivers to become more careless and trying to rush. We have to prohibit any incentive that is going to lead any driver to be financially rewarded for driving unsafely.
Okay, thank you. So next question, and I'm actually going to try to enforce the time limit this time around. So the next question is, Mayor de Blasio's Vision Zero plan was supposed to, as David mentioned, eliminate all traffic deaths by 2024. That's 2 years after one of you might take office. Can you commit to fulfilling that vision? And if not, do you have a new date in mind? Is it even reasonable to have a date in mind? And we will begin again with Sean.
So I am committed to meeting that date. And I fundamentally believe, as I said earlier, that this is not just a question of enforcement. This is a question of moving very quickly, speeding up our process of getting infrastructure changed in our city, reimagining our streets, and working effectively with the federal government to quickly get an investment that will allow us to put those shorter term measures in place while we are building out longer term measures that more fundamentally change our streets.
Okay, great. Diane.
So just real briefly on this, I will say absolutely. I think, we need to move towards prioritizing human lives and the lives of New Yorkers over car culture in New York City. We need to do everything that we can to reduce and incentivize the reduction of car use, supporting congestion pricing, eliminating parking requirements for new buildings, expanding metering and efficient loading options. These are all some of the things that we need to do in order to move towards a significant reduction of car culture, which is directly related to reducing the number of lives lost by virtue of car accidents. So yes.
Great, thank you. And Maya, 2024, is it doable?
2024 it is, and it starts with the fact that if we lose a life, we can't get it back. And let's just acknowledge that. So it's not really a question, it's an imperative. And I already have a plan to spend $10 billion in our city's capital construction budget, not only to create 100,000 new jobs, but to ensure it does things like solve our problems. And that includes these deaths, because we also have in it the ability to create more protected bike lanes, for example. And in my climate justice platform, I've already said I'm going to create an office for public space management. And that does include organizing how we're ensuring that we're doing transportation appropriately and safely. And so we're already going to have different organs of government in order to organize it better, to make sure it's serving our people. And that means protecting lives.
Great, thank you. And finally, Andrew.
I want to say something that's going to be very, very difficult for people to hear. The fact is that come the year 2024, we are almost certain to have someone die in a vehicle accident that year in New York City. The question is, how many of those deaths are going to be deaths that we could have prevented, that we could have avoided with intelligent investment, with the right policies? That's what we should be focusing on. The fact is, we are a city of over 8 million people with tens of thousands of vehicles coming through our city every day. And there are going to be a certain number of injuries and even fatalities in any given year, even if we do everything right. So I would reframe Vision Zero as zero avoidable, preventable deaths because we failed to act, we failed to invest. That is the standard we should be holding ourselves to, but we should be realistic about the fact that the goal should be reducing injuries and fatalities to a level where we can look at it and say we did everything in our power.
Great, thank you. Moving on, transit advocates often argue that de Blasio's failure to really complete Vision Zero is rooted in his sort of over deference to community boards, which are often not representative of their communities in terms of age, race, transportation preferences, you name it. So I'm curious what role you envision community boards playing in determining like the fate of all sorts of road infrastructure, advisory, or will you grant them veto power? And Sean, you are up first.
So Dana, I think this is a critical question, not just in transportation, but in housing, in where we cite shelters and supportive housing. There's so many issues that are contentious. As someone who's worked in neighborhoods in the city for 30 years on those issues, I understand that you do have to find a way to work with communities, but I do believe also, and this is part of my plan for New York City that I released last week, that we do need to restructure the way we interact with our community boards, do make them more representative. The other thing that I would say is we also need to lead with investment. we need to be ensuring that we are giving communities transportation alternatives as we're creating and implementing congestion pricing, as we are creating safer streets. We need to be prioritizing investment, particularly in communities that have been left behind for too long as transit deserts, to ensure that we are building support for alternatives at the same time that we are moving forward with tough decisions.
Thank you, Sean. Diane.
So, this is a good question. And I would say that community boards, while very useful in terms of gathering some information and representing on some level the community, they are not the be all and end all. And so I think that it is our responsibility, it would be my responsibility as mayor to cast a wider net in terms of gaining information from the community at large, including an education and outreach for everything that we want to do. Education and outreach strategy for everything that we want to do, so that we are casting a wide net. And also, I think it's really important to think about any decisions being made on the local level within the context of the city at large, what the needs are, what the distribution of certain resources are, et cetera, and making the decisions about those things within that context as well.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Maya.
Yeah, look, I'm running to be the next mayor because I know what it means to create relationships and pull people together to solve problems. And that's what we have to be able to do as a city. And we have to do it in a way that reimagines, not just recover. And that means it's not really about community boards, not community boards. It's about all of the community participation in problem solving. But one way we do that is we have to create the space where we're reimagining with shared principles and goals. And that means safety. That means making sure we all can get where we need to go effectively and efficiently. Far too many communities are actually taking 90 minutes to get to work. They're usually low income. They're usually communities of color. The kinds of things that create alternatives that help us manage our environmental health. All of these are questions that are around that include community boards, but also it's not about veto power, because it can't be about saying no to something that's actually going to deliver for a community. So it is engaging people, it's engaging them in planning, but it's engaging them in planning in a way that brings all our tools to get us where we need to go safely, and in a way that brings down our asthma rates and make sure that we all get what we need.
Thank you, Maya. And Andrew.
Well, at least two things are true. Number one, people know best what they need in their community. But the second thing is that right now it is very difficult to do a lot of things in New York City because there are different groups that have the ability to say no. And one of the experiences I've had, as an example, I've been in various communities discussing transportation plans, and I'm a cyclist, as many of you know, and I suggested a bike lane as an addition. And then there were people who reacted very, very negatively to me and said, like, hey, this neighborhood doesn't need bike lanes. Like, this is not a community of people that would want like that lane. And then I thought to myself, it's like, well, like that might be because you don't have a bike lane, because at least my experience when I started to ride a bike was that the infrastructure actually drove my behavior in a particular way. So there are at least certain aspects of what I think we should be trying to aspire for as a city that should take community feedback into account very, very heavily, particularly when they identify issues that no one else would know about. But I don't think having community boards vetoing some of these plans would be the right approach for certain citywide goals.
Okay, thank you. And now we are going to get a question from Iman Ramawi, who is the Accessoride Campaign Coordinator with New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Are you there, Iman?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. As an amputee with lupus, I am too aware how many people with disabilities are often left out of the conversation when it comes to accessibility necessary for people like me to get around the city. I've been an Accessoride customer for 13 years, and I have seen some great improvements like the on-demand pilot, but I have also seen some changes that don't work for working professionals like me, like a proposal for caps on the number of trips you can take and the cost of on-demand, leaving me, who has meetings in all 5 boroughs, often late or worse, not able to show up for work commitments. When I'm not relying on paratransit, I'm using the city sidewalks, which are often inaccessible. And in many cases, it's getting worse with the obstruction caused by open restaurant programs and the poor snow and ice removal. I've had piles of snow block me from leaving my house for multiple days too in the past. Moreover, companies providing bike share and e-scooter options need to provide accessible options, which are often lacking in order to give all New Yorkers the same opportunity to tackle micromobility issues affecting city dwellers. What will you do to make sure the city's streets, sidewalks, and various means of public transportation are more accessible for people like me with disabilities?
Thank you, Aman. So we will begin with Sean.
Thank you. And look, when I said we need to reimagine our streets for the 21st century, this is one of the central parts of what we need to do. When I was housing secretary, I created a partnership called the Sustainable Communities Partnership between the EPA, our health agency, our transportation, and HUD to invest the largest investment we've seen in a generation in planning for transportation and reimagining our streets, using complete streets guidelines, using universal accessibility guidelines to make sure that we're making our streets, our city more broadly accessible to everyone. And that's what we need to do here. We have to prioritize reimagining our streets, building the infrastructure so that we have the possibility for everyone to move around our city. And specifically on Access-a-Ride, you know, one of the things that's unique about me in this race is I've actually worked side by side with mayors across the country, even across the globe, who are innovating in this area. Why is it that we can order an Uber or Lyft on our phone and get one quickly, and we haven't been able to take this pilot that you described and create it citywide and really create on-demand transit for everyone that needs it within a reasonable period of time to allow you to get on with your lives? That's what I would do as mayor.
Thank you, Sean. Diane.
Sorry. Thank you for that question. So, you know, the city has got to be accessible to everyone, no matter what their ability is. And so, you know, I would commit to, as mayor, making sure that we're keeping public pathways free from ice, from snow, from pooling water, including our sidewalks, our crosswalks, and bus stops to ensure safety. We need to create and build safer crosswalks, especially at known dangerous intersections, and really work to make all forms of public transportation accessible to everyone. Right now, we know that only 25% of our subway stations are wheelchair accessible. We need to push and push the state and work with the state to make sure that we're addressing that. I would say by 2030, ensuring that our bus stops are ADA accessible as well. In terms of the question that you posed specifically about the Access-a-Ride, I think we should be integrating the city's accessible taxi fleet into the MTA's Access-a-Ride program to enable more immediate rides versus the 24-hour advanced request that is required right now, and push for the Access-a-Ride to be able to provide direct on-demand services to get people where they need to be faster, so that you don't have to take indirect routes to get where you want to be. And I'm conscious of time, and also making sure that all crossings are accessible for people who are blind by incorporating audio elements as well. You know, in other words, there's a lot that we can do and we should do, and we should be prioritizing that for everyone.
Thank you, Diane. All right, Maya.
So, as someone who is non-disabled, as someone who has benefited every single time that we have done something to make the lives of people with disabilities more accessible, like cuts in sidewalks, like bigger bathroom stalls, as someone who's a civil rights lawyer who worked with folks on ADA issues, compliance issues, like I can tell you one thing. I'm the candidate that actually pulled together a discussion with experts in the disability community around what we should be doing as a campaign, as a public event that we did virtually, to acknowledge, one, that unless we have the voice of folks with disabilities at the table telling us what needs to be done as city government, we won't get it right. And it's the other reason why within the Office of Public Space Management that I will create, we're actually creating a disability track that crosses all the decision-making of that office, that is also going to be itself de-siloing government, because it's going to be pulling in the different arms from DOT to SBS, Parks Department, and others to say, we have to be designing our spaces to serve all our people. And one of the things we heard from disability advocates is make sure we're elevating the decision-making, the power of the office, the mayor's office for disability services, because we don't right now. That office is an extremely important and valuable one I worked with as counsel to the mayor, that doesn't have enough power over what other agencies do. So we will elevate that to ensure that we're fixing these problems once and for all.
Thank you. All right, and lastly, Andrew.
Iman, it's great to see you again. How are you? Thank you for raising this. I agree with Diane that we should be integrating accessible taxis into Access-a-Ride. You certainly should not have a cap on the number of rides that you have, and have that cap get used up. I agree with you, Iman, that we need to clean our sidewalks and streets more quickly, so that people aren't struggling. Just today, I actually called for a restoration of the Department of Sanitation budget to 2020 levels because the cuts have made a big difference. Like people can tell. But the big picture is that I'm the only mayoral candidate who's asked for city control of the MTA, because the fact is right now, if New Yorkers get frustrated by a lack of accessibility on subways or buses, who do you complain to? You look at the mayor, then the mayor's like, I don't control this. And then you look at the MTA board, there are 4 New York City recommended board members out of 21. So if you feel like our voice is not heard at the MTA, you are right. People have been looked at me like, oh, like they're afraid for the city to take control of the MTA. I'm afraid for us not to have control of the MTA. It's like you can't control the way people get to work and school every day, and you're supposed to manage our city's recovery, try and make these subways and buses more accessible to people. Right now, we are unable even to exert control over the transportation arteries that define our city. It has to stop. It has to end. We need city control of the MTA.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, for the next question, we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. One of Mayor de Blasio's proudest transportation achievements is his citywide ferry system, which of course is an initiative he was able to undertake without the involvement of the state, something he routinely cast as a virtue. Critics note that while the ferry system does help some commuters connect to the rest of the city, it doesn't carry all that many people, and it's heavily subsidized. Would you expand it, retract it, make it smaller, or keep it as is? And we will start with Andrew.
Oh, wow, Dana. Like, this is such a tough question because I just love the ferries. I love them. When you ride on them, they feel like a great way to get around. It feels environmentally friendly. But the fact is some of these routes just aren't really getting a ton of customers, and we're subsidizing them at a time when our budget is going to be constrained. So I think we're gonna have to make some tough choices. My goal would be to try and support the routes that frankly have proven that they're helping New Yorkers and have demand. And we have a window of time for that. But the routes that just aren't serving that many people, we are going to have to re-examine and even cut back. And that pains me to say because I love these things. If people aren't using them, then we just have to invest in the things that are actually getting people where they need to go.
Thanks, Andrew. All right, Maya, you're up.
I just rode our ferry just last week, and what we really need to do is expand it, but do it in a way that also, where appropriate, both where we need it to make sure we have that service because of usage, but also increase the rates like we do for express bus service. Recognize that means making sure it's priced appropriately for those it's serving. And, I'll go back to the fact that we have to have a comprehensive strategy around public transit. I'm someone who, when I ran the Center for Social Inclusion, which worked to dismantle structural racism, we focused on transit equity. And a big part of that was recognizing where the deserts are, what people need in order to, sometimes it's more bus lanes to connect to subway systems. But we have to recognize we got folks in 2 and 3 fare zones. That is unfair, and we have to have fair fares. And that's what I'll do. And the ferry system will be part of that analysis.
Thank you, Maya. Diane, what would you do with the ferry system?
I would not expand the ferry system. The reality of it is that we've got to prioritize our marginalized communities, not just in words, but in funding. And that includes public transportation and public transit. You know, for too long, our folks who are struggling with income issues and other disparities are also struggling with transportation disparities and transportation apartheid. How we move through the city is inextricably linked to the rest of our lives. And we've got to actually prioritize funding the systems that people use. Let's start with the buses, which we know are used predominantly by low-income Black and brown folks. Let's expand that. And then let's focus on the subway system. I don't think that the ferry system is something that I would look to expand right now.
Thank you. And Sean.
Thanks, Dana. So fundamentally, we need to change the way we plan and envision our city. We need real comprehensive planning based on what I call 15-minute neighborhoods. We need to be looking at every neighborhood and making sure that every New Yorker has real transportation alternatives within 15 minutes of their front door that get them to jobs, to school, to their friends and neighbors quickly. And so I do see ferries as having a critical role. And frankly, I don't mind that we subsidize them, given that we subsidize cars more than anything else by paying for roads and paying for parking and so many other things in this city that are deeply subsidized. I think the question has to be, are they equitably distributed and where is their demand? I was in Staten Island the other day. I was in the East Bronx. I know that there is demand, including in Black and brown communities, but we need to have a system that plans equitably and interconnects these modes. We need to make sure we have last mile solutions for ferries, such as City Bike and other micromobility modes that allow us to create an integrated network.
Thank you, Sean. All right, now we are going to take a question from Karen Hamilton, who is a Riders Alliance member, urban planner, and who lives in a transit desert. Karen, are you there?
Hi, how are you? So, yes, I live in Southeast Queens, and it was formerly called a 2-fare zone, since the nearest subway station is 30 to 45 minutes away by bus. And this district served by 38 routes, and the closest bus stops are usually a few blocks away, so buses should be the most convenient mode of transit. In reality, buses are often slow, unreliable, and even uncomfortable when crowded. And buses crawl along major corridors like Merrick Boulevard and Jamaica Avenue, stalled by traffic, double parked cars, and delivery trucks. Now, New York City buses are on the slowest in the country, despite a ridership of more than 1 million and being a mode of choice for more than half of essential workers. So as mayor, what commitments will you make to improve our bus systems, speeds, accessibility, and comfort and safety at our bus stops, particularly in neighborhoods like mine, where buses are essential?
Thank you, Karen. We're going to go in reverse alphabetical again. Andrew, you're up first.
Thank you, Karen. I was just in Southeast Queens and I heard something very similar from a number of people. So we have to build on a couple of the successes we've had where on certain thoroughfares, primarily in Manhattan, because you know, like that's where a lot of things start in this area. We've had success with rapid transit bus service and select bus service, where there's been, frankly, like a cleared out corridor where car traffic is not provided on that street. And so if you can imagine in Southeast Queens, if you had a similar road where, frankly, cars are not going, then all of a sudden the buses would be much more efficient. And so if it's worked in Manhattan, there is no reason why it should not work in Southeast Queens, and that we should have a rapid transit bus corridor that precludes auto traffic. And then you would see speeds speed up significantly. I'm passionate about this because the biggest determinant of your happiness is your commute time. And if you have a slow commute that you know should be faster, it will make you unhappy. And there is no reason why we're inflicting that on New Yorkers when we've seen success in other neighborhoods that can be replicated in transit deserts like Southeast Queens.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew. Maya, you're next.
I personally experienced this, I'll be honest, because when I was in college, my boyfriend lived in Laurelton and I lived on Staten Island for the summer. And I used to have to take the ferry and then the subway and then the bus. It was a heck of a long commute. And we also know from the data exactly what you're talking about, because Black people in this city, and let's call it, have the longest commute rates of any group, but also Black, Latino, Asian, higher than white. And that is honestly because of both segregated housing, but it's also because we did not invest in public transit in traditional communities of color. That has to change. Buses are a critical part of doing that. We have to expand bus lanes, expand bus rapid transit. I will do that, but I will focus first and at where the commute times are the longest and to connect folks to where they have to get to and where they have to get home.
Thanks, Maya. Diane.
Yes, thank you. So yes, you know, the problem that you raise is one that I am not unfamiliar with. The MTA and issues with the MTA, whether we're talking about buses or trains, have disproportionately affected minority, working class, and low-income communities for far too long. In your instance, what we need to do is we need to expand busways, we need to expand express lanes, we need to do that in such a way that prioritizes low-income and transit apartheid communities and neighborhoods specifically. We also need to expand bus rapid transit networks in major corridors so that we're facilitating access and transportation across the board. And also we need to be looking at expanding the fair fares so that we're reaching that out to students and to low-income community members so that everybody has not just access to transportation system in terms of the routes, but also in terms of the economic ability to access that.
Thanks, Diane. And lastly, Sean.
Thanks so much. And I want to agree with what everyone else has said about the importance of dedicated routes in BRT. And as perhaps the transportation wonk in this group, I'd say I'm the only one who's ever been to Curitiba, Brazil, and seen arguably the best bus rapid transit system in the world. But we have to understand that that's only one part of the solution. We really need to solve these issues more broadly. And fundamentally, we need the MTA to commit to the bus redesign that they've been talking about for a long time, but not walking the walk on. And what I haven't heard is the critical importance of changing the signaling infrastructure in this city. We have over 300 bus routes in this city, and fewer than 10 of them actually have TSP available right now to speed those trips. So yes, dedicated lanes, BRT, but we need to have a system that works for everyone. And we can do that if we commit to TSP, to changing our stop locations, and to get the MTA finally moving on a redesign of our bus system.
Thank you. I think this will be our last question before the lightning round, and I'll probably do it in alphabetical order because I find the reverse kind of confusing. It's about the MTA. The mayor does not control the MTA, but several of you have argued that to improve bus and subway service, the next mayor should at the very least exert more control over it. We all know that it's highly unlikely that the state would give up that authority, though some of you might argue otherwise. I'm curious, practically speaking, realistically speaking, how do you think you can achieve more influence over an authority whose power structure and purse strings are almost entirely controlled by the state? And we will begin with Sean.
Thanks, Dana. And I do agree that it is completely unrealistic to say the mayor should take over the MTA. The M in MTA stands for metropolitan. We have a metropolitan system that includes lines that run beyond the 5 boroughs across this region into other states. And we need to focus not on sound bites, but on actually solving this problem. And here's what I would do. I would put more skin in the game with the coming of congestion pricing, which I am completely supportive of. We need to make sure we're investing more there. I would take a portion of the revenues from the marijuana tax and would look at value capture and other innovative mechanisms. Folks should remember the number 7 line extension on the west side of Manhattan was paid for by city revenues. We should be doing all of that in exchange for more power, more control, more board seats. And that is the right way to make sure that we actually get a metropolitan transportation system that works.
Thank you, Sean. Diane, how would you exert or try to exert more authority over the MTA?
So I actually believe that we should, over the long term, move towards municipal control of the subways and the buses. I think, state control has meant that the subways, the suburbs, and commuter trains have been prioritized over the city, where people are often entirely reliant on public transportation. I believe that municipal control can ultimately shift that dynamic. But in order to do that successfully, we've really got to delegate an expanded degree of taxing authority as well, in order to be able to, have the revenue as well as the responsibility. I think one of the ways that we could also think about doing that is, I do agree with Sean in terms of congestion pricing and implementing that relatively quickly. I think we need to be looking at metered parking and fees for using public roads and sidewalks. And also, ultimately, I've been a big advocate of taxing the rich for us to be able to move forward and fix the subways. But I do think that there is ultimately a goal, or should be a goal, towards controlling the subway system in New York City.
Thank you, Diane. Maya.
Well, look, at the end of the day, home rule, home rule, home rule. That's just something we need for New York City. We have far too many of these questions where we have these issues, and the MTA is something that Sean is right about. But honestly, I'd take it if I got the ability to generate the revenue for it. That right now is controlled by the state. But I think we also have to be honest that the state can't fix this alone either. We need the federal government. We need the resources to come. It's good that we got some relief out of the COVID relief package that just passed. We're going to need more, but we also have to have the MTA be a more effectively run entity, no matter who controls it, and much more responsive to our needs, as well as getting the infrastructure dollars we need. And I think we can get that from the federal government. And I think we know that when you're 8% of GDP of the nation, which is what we are, that we are entitled to making sure we keep our economy going, our people being able to get around this city. And that does mean investing in our public subway system, as well as having fair fares. Because if it's too expensive to ride it, if you have multiple fare zones, it just doesn't matter for too many of our residents. And we have to fix that.
Thank you, Maya.
And apologies that I have to run. I had a
Yes.
hard stop. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Dana.
for joining us.
And I'm headed to
Andrew.
the same forum, so thank you all. Great to be on.
Bye. Andrew.
Again, I'm the sole mayoral candidate saying that the city must control our own destiny, which includes the way people work and school every day. And so if it's not the entire MTA, it could be New York City Transit and NYCT. But here's the common sense argument I'd make. The folks in New York City are going to look up and they're going to hold the mayor accountable for something that's so important in their daily lives, and they should. So what I'm going to say to the folks in Albany is, let me have the responsibility. Let me have the headaches. Let me be able to, frankly, take responsibility for something that many people have been disappointed in for the last number of years. At a minimum, we should have, again, the majority of these MTA board appointments. And in terms of the way the influence would run, like to me, I need to fight for the people of New York City. I need to try and address our needs. And so if that involves making a case publicly to the folks at the MTA, look, here are the issues, here are the things that are not being addressed. Maybe we can get people to a point where they're like, please take this responsibility rather than have various officials be responsible for changes that haven't been made.
Okay, Diane and Andrew, you're the two survivors of this round. So we're going to do lightning round now. And I guess I will ask each question. They're basically yes or no questions, starting with this one. Diane, will you commit to commuting to City Hall by subway, bus, or bike if you become mayor?
Yeah, I can take the A train straight to City Hall from here.
Andrew?
Definitely subway or bike regularly. I'd be delighted to bike. That would be probably the high point of my day. Though I will confess there will probably be times I use a car to make phone calls, during the commute.
Okay, Diane, do you support lowering the citywide speed limit to 20 miles per hour?
Yes, after we significantly reduce cars in the city, yes.
Andrew?
Yes, I believe it would reduce fatality rate significantly.
Can you name your favorite bus line, Diane?
38, the B38 down DeKalb Avenue in Brooklyn.
Andrew?
It's the M42. It just goes back and forth.
True. The BQX, I'm sure you're familiar with it, the light rail proposal from de Blasio that will very much be in the next mayor's under his, he'll be able to, or she will be able to kill it or not kill it. So would you kill it or would you keep working on it, Diane?
We'll probably kill it.
Andrew?
So the BQE is falling apart. We're
The
going
BQ, sorry, I wasn't clear. The BQX, the light rail proposal.
Oh yeah, the BQX will be killed. I believe.
Should the transit system have more NYPD officers, fewer, or the same amount of NYPD officers, Diane?
You're kidding, right? No, they should not have more.
So the same amount or fewer?
Fewer.
Fewer. And Andrew?
What was the beginning of that question?
The New York City Transit. The question was about the NYPD's presence there. Do you think there should be more NYPD presence, the same amount, or less?
I think we need to be responsive to what is happening at any given moment. So, in sometimes it might be more and sometimes it might be less. Though if they are there, they should not be busting turnstile jumpers and criminalizing poverty. They should be homing in on, like genuine concerns for the public.
Okay, and lastly, and I think, Diane, you might have already mentioned this, but do you support eliminating minimum parking requirements from the zoning code?
Absolutely.
And Andrew?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you both. And I think we're going to do a 5-minute break before the next panel.
Bye, everyone. Let's keep New York City moving.
Thanks, Dana. Bye, everyone.
Dana, you're a pro, I have to say. Bye, Diane. We're the last people.
Bye, Andrew.
So thank you, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed their quick bathroom break, their Twitter or Facebook break. Thank you to all of the hundreds of people that are with us tonight, and thank you to all of our candidates and to our moderator. Once again, I'm Stephanie Burgos Veras, organizing with the Riders Alliance. I know most of you have already been here, so I probably won't say the same things, but for those who are joining, we just want to let people know that this is our second panel, right? Our evening was broken up into two parts, and we're at the second part. And we have American Sign Language here today. They will be up on the screen throughout the entire event. We also have Spanish interpretation. And so if you want to join and listen in Spanish, you can click the icon at the bottom where it says interpretation, select Spanish, and you'll be able to hear. As well, we also have live captioning. I will be dropping the link in the chat where you can see live captioning in English while the event is going on. For those who are joining, we are, sharing, we are live on Facebook as well. We have some staff that are live tweeting, and we're using our hashtag TranspoMayor 2021. So if you're joining now, you know, and if you are here for an hour and you haven't tweeted yet, what are you waiting for? TranspoMayor 2021. And as I said, we're a grassroots organization. We're made up of grassroots people. And so we want to have just one more icebreaker before we have two icebreakers. One that we're going to pose a poll for everyone who's watching, and then we have another one that Dana will lead. So for this one, it's not about Civics 101, but we want to learn more about how do you like to get around. So let us know, what is your favorite way to get around New York City? So I'll launch this poll. Let us know. And we'll leave it up for 60 seconds, and we'll kind of see what, who's in the crowd, how do people like to get around? It'll be good information for everyone here. So we'll leave it on for 60 seconds, and then Dana will lead our second icebreaker. And when you do hear the icebreaker, if you didn't do it the first time, for the second time, go ahead and take a picture with your items and use our hashtag TranspoMayor 2021. All right, so let's see. We got a lot of walkers in the crowd, I see. Let's see who's going to be the winner here. Not there's any winner. They all are very important. So we have a few more seconds for those who are still in the crowd before we close the poll and get to the second part of our event tonight, of our forum. All right, so we're at 60 seconds. So if you haven't filled it out, maybe next time. All right, so let's see what came out. So our poll, we have 50% of people in the crowd are bikers, 30% use buses, 66% use subways. We have 8% of riders 8% of attendees who use the Long Island Railroad and the Metro North. Around 27% of folks in here like to use City Bike to get around. We have a winner here, almost 69% like to walk around the city. 4% like scooters, and 16% like to get around in ferries. So with that, that's just our first icebreaker. And thank you once again that everyone is here, and we hope that the rest of the night is informative, fun, and engaging. And once again, please don't forget to use our hashtag. And with that, I'll pass it over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Let me just introduce everyone. So we have here Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough President, who I think has perhaps yet to join us. Catherine Garcia, who I think is also running a bit late. Let's see who is actually here. Now I see. All right. I see Scott Stringer, the New York City Comptroller, Art Chang, a former JP Morgan Chase executive, Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough President. Is Jocelyn here? Jocelyn Taylor, hello. Jocelyn is an executive of a general contracting firm. And I think that's it for now. So we are going to start with an icebreaker, as Stephanie mentioned. And that icebreaker is a scavenger hunt. We'd like each of you to find quickly something that you use every day to get around town, an emblem of your transportation know-how, be it a Metro card, a bike helmet, a city bike key, or car keys, whatever, anything transportation related, and show it to us. Awesome. Okay, so what do we have? I see Art has a bike helmet and a Metro card. Eric has a Metro card. Scott has a Metro card. Jocelyn has a Metro card. Very nice. All right, so let's jump right into it. Our first question is going to come from David Shepard, who is a founding member of Families for Safe Streets and a member of the Advisory Council for Transportation Alternatives. In 2009, a driver killed his fiance on Baychester Avenue in the Bronx. David, are you there? Hello.
Good evening, all. Are you seeing me? Good evening, all. So as Dana mentioned, my name is Dave Shepard. I'm a member of Family for Safe Streets, the club that no one wants to join. We have all either been injured or lost a loved one in a crash, and we confront the epidemic of traffic injuries and deaths through advocacy and support. Every 3 hours, someone is seriously injured or killed on a New York City street. And that doesn't include the thousands of crashes where injuries might not be life-threatening. My loving fiance, Sonia Powell, was killed on Baychester Ave in the Bronx the day after Thanksgiving in 2009. I can't believe it's been 12 years. She was a loving and kind person who worked as a nurse and served her patients with honor and distinction. She was a very loving person who gave more than she asked. Tonight, my question is, or Family for Safe Streets question rather, is how will you get Vision Zero back on track? During his mayoral run, Mayor de Blasio committed to eliminating traffic fatalities by 2024. New York City is clearly not on track to achieve this goal. And in fact, during COVID, as with the rest of the country, the number of people killed and seriously injured on our roadways has increased. Family for Safe Streets members fought alongside street safety advocates for passage of Vision Zero design standards and the street master plan, but these were never funded or fully implemented. We urge the city to earmark speed camera revenue to fix our broken streets, but the city opposed the measure. As mayor, how will you get Vision Zero back on track? The engineering standards related to Vision Zero have a proven track record all over the world. How will you get this life-saving function back on track? It's really sad that our children and elderly are afraid to walk the streets due to the number of traffic crashes and related fatalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Just a reminder to keep your responses to 60 seconds if possible, and we're going to start in alphabetical order and at some point go in reverse. So Eric, starting with you.
Thank you, and thank you. That's a powerful testimony, David, and something I know far too often. I spent many days with the advocacy and standing with the families long after the cameras were gone, helping them bury their loved ones, from Kevin Angel Flores to Paysan Lot. These are real people to me. And it's about really putting the money where we need to do so, and proper enforcement. And I'm going to be clear on that. As a police officer, I was in charge of traffic stats, and we took a serious approach to identifying those areas where you had traffic fatalities. And anyone who's in this business is well aware there are certain locations in this city that you can predict almost the number of accidents you're having there based on the way the street designs are, the layout, based on the speeding. We need to apply that data to bringing down the numbers. Look at 9th Street in Brooklyn as a similar location. And so I'm going to use the technology, use the enforcement, use the redesign to handle this problem.
Awesome, thank you. Eric, Art, you are up next.
All right, thank you. And David, I'm so sorry for your loss. Like Eric, I know too many people who've been in this situation, it's a terrible thing. So many of the problems in our city come from the fact that we know about them in advance, but we do nothing to prevent them. I'm a complete advocate of speed cameras. I'm a complete advocate of enforcement, but that comes after the fact. So we need to think about preventing these issues. So these are street issues. These are an intersection between the NYPD, the DOT, the design of the bikeways and the roadways. We need to bring all these different aspects together in a coordinated fashion, use data to highlight the points where we're having the most issues, and then bring people together to actually solve those problems in an integrated fashion. It's the only way we can do this.
Great, thank you, Art. Scott, you are up next.
I also want to just say sorry for your loss and all the work you're doing to help other people. I think it's very powerful. Look, I believe that the next mayor should look at how we redesign streets through the lens of 8-year-olds, because what I worry about as a parent of 2 little boys is that terrible moment when the car meets the child. And we have to change that so it doesn't happen. In fact, if we would redesign streets for 8-year-olds, we would also help 80-year-olds. And that includes car-free streets at schools. Why should parents have to keep looking left and right? Why don't we just get the kids safely into the schools? We do need enforcement cameras for bus lanes and bike lanes and traffic lights, but bike lanes also need to truly be protected. And I believe that we have an opportunity to redesign our streets, widen our streets, really make the mission of Vision Zero actually work by investing the capital, the engineering design, and the will to fundamentally change our streetscape. I believe in the 25 by 25 plan to reclaim our streets for communities, not cars. 80% of New York really is about sidewalks and streets, but 70% of that space, we give it away to cars. And then we wonder why we can't control traffic.
Thank you. All right, and Jocelyn.
Thank you so much. And I also want to express my condolences on your loss. That's something that no one should have to go through. When we talk about how we're going to, first and foremost, the question was, would I expand upon or make sure that we actually implement Vision Zero? And yes, I would. It takes a financial investment to ensure that we create the infrastructure needed to ensure that we have safe streets in this city. And that includes more communication, especially with communities that are impacted. An example of that is that even on my own street, we asked for street bumps, speed bumps for a number of years, and they've never been implemented. Lo and behold, a truck came balling down the street and ran into a fence. That could have been a person there. The communities know what they need in order to keep themselves safe. So we have to have more effective communication. And I would agree with Art when we say we have to be proactive, not reactive. It's not enough to just be punitive after the fact. We have to have communication to ensure that we prevent these accidents from happening.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Our next question is a bit of a follow-up to that one. Mayor de Blasio's Vision Zero plan was supposed to eliminate all traffic deaths by 2024. 2024 will be 2 years after one of you possibly takes office. Can you commit to fulfilling that vision? And if not, do you have a new date in mind? And is a date even a reasonable approach? And we'll again start with Eric.
Yes, specifically, I think the 2024 is a real date that's feasible. And again, I want to lean into what I stated of anyone who has done this work like I did as a captain. We know the locations where these accidents are happening repeatedly. And you can speak with the families of Safe Street, and they will tell you that many of these areas had repeated accidents. The crashes. It may not have been a fatality or death, but the crashes were there beforehand. We don't have to wait until you have a crash that causes a fatality. I'm going to use the pre-existing data, change the street designs, and we clearly can meet Vision Zero by 2024 with the proper allocation of both enforcement, redesigning streets, and making our streets safer for pedestrians.
Great, thank you. Art, same question. Is 2024 viable?
It is. It's going to take a huge amount of effort, and it's going to take a different kind of an approach from government. I'm completely in support of the Municipal Art Society's recommendation to appoint a director of the public realm at the deputy mayor level. That person will be tasked with this as one of the top priorities. I'm the only mayoral candidate who's actually built, designed, and built streets. And we know this can be done. We know that the tools exist within our transportation department, within our parks department, who are responsible for some of the sidewalks. And we know that the resources exist in the communities to find this information. We can also use an improved 311 system to be able to alert us about the data that needs to happen. So the things like what Jocelyn described, like that should be something that should be transparent to everybody, available for follow-up, and should again fall into the responsibility of this new director of the public realm.
Thank you, Art. Scott, 2024?
You know, part of the problem with this administration is that there were too many deadlines set when the mayor wouldn't be mayor. So I will obviously try to get to his deadline, but I don't think we can do it by this incrementalist approach. The reality is that we have to do a wholly owned redesign of our streetscape. And that's going to include more busways, more bike lanes, more protected bike lanes. We have to make sure that we reduce cars fundamentally. And that means making open space permanent. It means making us have the ability to build 100 new playgrounds, as I proposed. But the way we're going to get there is not just from enforcement. That's after the fact. We need to take advantage of this pandemic in the way we build our city. This is our once in a lifetime generational opportunity to really reimagine what New York would look like. Look at it from Copenhagen and Barcelona and all the great street cities. I want to be the street mayor because I believe my experience in land use and zoning and community-based planning uniquely gives me an opportunity and a perspective to work with our communities, our transit advocates, and do something truly big at this moment in history.
Thank you, Scott. Jocelyn, 2024.
2024, you know, I have to agree with Scott. We have to stop having 5-year plans for 4-year terms. People want to see results, right? We've done all the data analysis that we need to do about this situation. It's time to start implementing some things that people can, so that people can see results in their communities. When it comes to things like putting in speed cameras and everything like that, we get it done, and we get it done in a time efficient manner. And when it comes to this, we have to be able to do the same thing. So I think 2024, from my perspective, is too far along. We have to look at already established best practices and utilize that as a means to be able to get this done quicker. We don't have to wait until 2024. We know what the issues are. We know what the solutions are. We should just go ahead and implement them and get it done.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Next question is kind of related. Transit advocates often argue that de Blasio's failure to complete Vision Zero is rooted in his deference to community boards, which are often not representative of their communities in terms of age, race, or transportation preferences. what role do you envision giving to community boards in determining road infrastructure? Will it be an advisory role, or will you grant them de facto veto power? And we are again starting with Eric.
There were many bike lanes, also changes in street structures and designs where I had community boards who were against it, and I continue to advocate for it. I believe community boards should play an advisory role to give input. I'm a strong believer not only in traffic, but in other areas. Community boards are the most local level of government, and we should have an input from them on how they want their communities to look. But it's imperative as the borough president, as council members, to diversify the board. That's what I did, from having young people on the board, business people, advocates for safe streets, different combination of people participating in the process. I believe in the community boards, and in places where I disagree with them, such as the Clausen Avenue bike lane, I pushed through it and forced to go in that direction, but I believe in the process, and we should continue to hear the voices from the community.
Great, thank you, Eric. Art, advisory or veto power for community boards?
Advisory for sure. There are so many issues beyond traffic safety and pedestrian safety that affect our overall city. It's the design of the streets. It's the future of the streets. It's the parks. It's the sanitation, the systems that run throughout the entire city that need to be decided at the citywide level. How are we going to distribute our homeless shelters? How are we going to distribute our low-income housing? You know, if we're going to go toward a vision of 15-minute communities, how are we going to do that? If we need to be able to work with the community boards, but they're in an advisory capacity. And the other thing that came through loud and clear, you know, both in the Black Lives Matter protests and also in these recent AAPI, Stop AAPI hate protests, is that the community is calling for a different kind of engagement. It can't just be with the community boards. It has to be with different popular bottom-up community representation.
Great, thank you, Art. Scott, you are next.
Well, community boards are essentially advisory, and that certainly should be as it relates to the streetscape and master planning. I do think that community boards and other organizations, as Art mentioned, should be part of the larger conversation in the community. But look, the real leadership to get things done has to come from City Hall. You have to have a mayor and a mayoral team that knows how to engage communities, build consensus. If we're talking about reimagining neighborhoods and its different components, we're going to have that larger conversation. And actually, I look forward to it. It's work that I've done all my life. I was a borough president that actually didn't make political appointments to community boards. I actually, put together an independent screening panel. So we got more young people. We got more people of color. We got more diverse resumes, because I know that if we're going to have a conversation, it can't only be the same people making all the decisions. But that is how we build consensus. And I don't think we should shy away from engagement, but obviously there's no veto power when it comes to land use and streetscape and the issues we have to work on.
Thank you, Scott. Jocelyn, same question.
Thank you. I think that we have to stop thinking that everything in the city is one size fits all, and that only the leadership in the city should have a say in what actually happens in the city. If you're paying attention to what's going on in this moment, people want to be heard, and people want to be empowered to make decisions on things that will impact their lives and in their communities. So we have to utilize technology to give not just the community board, but communities at large the opportunity to have a vote and what is going on in their community. If we can vote for American Idol, why can't people in communities have a vote or a say in what happens with their community? The city is behind as it relates to technology. So from my perspective, not only should they have an advisory role, but they should have a veto role. It shouldn't be either or to me. They should be able to have an impact in what happens in their communities. We have to empower communities and give them resources that they need in order to be able to get things done more expeditiously. When we continue with all of this bureaucracy and all of these conversations from one level to the next, ultimately nothing gets done and the term is over.
Great, Thank you. Our next question is going to come from Iman Ramawi, who is the Accessoride Campaign Coordinator with New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Iman, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Thank you so much. Thank you all. As an amputee with lupus, I am all too aware how people with disabilities are often left out of the conversation when it comes to improving transportation and the accessibility necessary for people like me to get around the city. I've been an Accessoride customer for 13 years, and I've seen some great improvements like the on-demand pilot, but I have also seen some changes that don't work for working professionals like me, like a proposal for caps on the number of trips you can take and the cost of on-demand, leaving me, who has meetings all over all 5 boroughs, often late, or worse, not able to even show up to work commitments. When I'm not relying on paratransit, I'm using the city sidewalks, which are often inaccessible, and in many cases, it's getting worse with the obstruction caused by the open restaurants program and by poor snow and ice removal. I've had piles of snow block me from even leaving my house for days too in the past. Moreover, companies provide bike share and e-scooter options need to provide accessible options, which are often lacking, in order to give all New Yorkers the same opportunities to tackle micromobility issues affecting city dwellers. What will you do to make sure the city streets, sidewalks, and various means of public transportation are more accessible for people with disabilities like me? Thank you.
Thank you, Iman. This one will do reverse alphabetical order, which I guess means we are starting with Jocelyn.
Thank you. And thank you for that question, Iman. It's a great question. You know, when my mom was alive, she actually had Accessoride. And one of the things I have to say, it wasn't a program that really worked well for her. I enrolled her in the program because there were times when her home health aide would have to take her to various doctor's appointments and I wouldn't be around. One of the things that I found with the Accessoride is that the clients wait for an exorbitant amount of time for the Accessoride. So it goes back to the utilization of technology. If we want someone to utilize something, we have to make it streamlined and efficient. And we have to make sure that it's going to be something that it doesn't cause stress to them, right? Accessoride is supposed to be a help. So we have to invest in ensuring that the city actually supplements Accessoride. Listen, if I could call Uber and Uber could be in my door in 5 minutes, no one should have to wait for an Accessoride for an hour. Recently, when I was in East New York at the community center, there were seniors there waiting to get their vaccinations. One of the things I found when I walked in was seniors who were waiting there for over 30 minutes for their Accessoride. I think in this city, we need to invest and do better. I know we're doing a lot as it relates to you know, the street curbs and all of that type of thing. It's happening, but it's not happening quick enough. We need to engage more firms that do that type of work so we can speed up that process and make sure that everyone has access in the city. No one should be stuck at home at any time.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Scott, same question.
Wanna say, I think Jocelyn hit it. We should have Accessoride on demand. That is a time that should happen. As controller, I've audited Accessoride time and time again, and it's the same thing over and over again. They don't take advantage of technology. They don't respect people's mobility. And I have seen firsthand through audits and my own eyes that there are people who are literally sitting in the freezing cold waiting for an Accessoride that may not show up. It is just a system that with real management and a real plan could bring this kind of transportation in the 21st century. But look, as controller, I did some of the most compelling audits on broken elevators and broken escalators. I called out the MTA and spurred them to make these repairs because there's nothing more terrible than somebody who is navigating underground and can't get back up the elevator or can't get back up the escalator. There have been people stuck for hours who can't move in below the subway system. People, this is the 21st century. This is unbelievable that we are in this place. So as mayor, I'm going to make sure that we manage the hell out of transportation and how we make sure that people who need accessibility are able to obtain it. This is not something that should be kicked down the road. This has been a poorly managed process and a lack of respect and a lack of dignity for people who are every bit New Yorkers with professional careers and places to go and people to see.
Thank you, Scott. Art.
Well, Iman, I'm so sorry that you have to go through this. What a terrible thing to have to experience, because you're just part of the city like everybody else. And one thing that I know is that the things that benefit people with disabilities benefit everybody. If it works for you, and then it will work with a parent with a stroller, or someone who is elderly, or someone in a wheelchair. And I mean, have you ever pushed a stroller through the snow and try to go through a crosswalk? It is virtually impossible. So what we have to do is go back to this director of a public realm kind of process and rethink, what does it mean to have public streets that are navigable by people who have disabilities? What does it mean to have transportation that is accessible to everybody? And I think about some of the experiments that are happening abroad. Like we have to think about London, for example, where they're piloting a flexible bus service that operates like a taxi. You call it, it comes to your home. It's a share a ride for people who are disabled and everybody else. So why shouldn't we start with the needs of disabled people and enable everybody to enjoy the benefits of those? And as mayor, that is what my approach will be.
Thank you, Art. And Eric, same question.
That's an important question, and I really thank you for that question because it is unimaginable that not only for our adults, but even our children, we teamed up with students from Edward R. Mayoral High School, and we spoke to them. Many of them had to use the accessor ride, and I should say the inaccessible ride service, and they had to not do what young people do. They had to plan out their days. No one should have to go through moving throughout this city, having to encounter something as challenging as this. I believe we should tap into the yellow cab services. We should tap into the for hire services, the Ubers, the Lyft, and we should have that part of the accessor ride program. And there was a pilot project. I thought it was excellent. There's no reason we should expand it. You should be able to get a ride when you need it, how you need it, without having to plan out your day.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Aman. On to a different topic. This one is ferries. One of Mayor de Blasio's proudest transportation achievements is his citywide ferry system, which is an initiative that he often notes he was able to undertake without the involvement of the state. Critics say that the ferry system is oversubsidized and doesn't carry all that many people. My question is, what would you do with the mayor's ferry system? Would you expand it, keep it as is, shrink it? And this time, let's start with Eric.
I love using our waterways. I think it's extremely important to continue to figure out how to do it, that it is more cost effective. Right now, the service, we're subsidizing a lot. I believe that we need to look into some of our units of housing that's along the waterfront, have them subsidize some of the cost of doing it. I think we're using almost $6 to $7 for each ride. I think that we need to find a more cost-effective way to do it, and the inefficiencies should be connected to some of our major transportation hubs. And so I love the idea of using our waterways. It is done in other parts of the globe, and we just need to find a more cost-effective way to do so.
So just to be clear, you would basically keep the system as is, just find a more cost-effective way of running it?
Yes, I would. We're subsidizing too much right now, and I would find a more cost-effective way to do so.
Okay, thank you. Art, what would you do with the mayor's ferry system?
I can't guarantee that I would keep it. But as the only person here who has actually implemented a ferry system at Queens West, I can say that it's a very challenging situation, that even when we were doing the ferry to Queens West to Hunters Point, we knew that there was a supply and demand problem, that we were building a ferry that had a very high cost basis, and that we had to somehow expand demand at both ends of the route both on the Queens side and on the Manhattan side. And the question that I would have is, well, what's the data? What does the data show us about that supply-demand match? Is there a way to increase the demand to make the ferry more of an economical proposition, right? Is there a way, or is maybe the ferry not working? So we may actually have some lines that work, and we may have other lines that don't work. We know that the ferries to Weehawken, for example, work very well. The ferry system is really a tri-state intermodal point of transportation. People go from car to ferry to subway, from car to ferry to taxi. And so we need to look at all of those different points and then figure out what is necessary. And then, by the way, we have to include the people who ride the ferry in that conversation. How is the pricing for them? Is the pricing too high? Is the pricing too low? Can we actually increase demand by changing the pricing structure?
Sorry, Scott, what would you do with the mayor's ferry system?
Well, I would rip up the mayor's contract with the ferry operator right now. It is a $369 million hit to taxpayers. And here's a great deal. It's great to be a ferry operator with Bill de Blasio, because that ferry operator gets to keep the concessions. We actually buy the ferry operator the boats. So the day the boat hits the water, it loses its value every day. I said to the mayor and EDC, this is no way to run a ferry service. And when you have more weekend traffic on the ferries than you do weekday, it's clear that there's a space for ferries, but the real investment in the city has to be to expand our bus network and other transportation alternatives. But the first thing I'm going to do as mayor is come into EDC, bring in financial experts who understand how to do contracting, get better deals with our transportation network. But this has been a boondoggle like none other.
Thank you. Just to be clear, would you expand the size of the ferry network, or
I would
keep it the same, or shrink it?
I don't want to take away what people have come to expect. I would rework the contract. I'm certainly not going to buy boats and give concessions and just about the whole kit and caboodle to a favorite operator. What I'm going to do is come up with a comprehensive financial plan. But ultimately, the goal has to be, if we're going to do, I think, transportation subsidy and expansion, I would drive it into the buses and the bus lanes, because I think that's a better bang for the buck. But I would keep the service for the communities right now.
Great, thank you. And Jocelyn, what would you do with the mayor's ferry service?
Well, listen, I'm sure we have a ton of data that talks about the utilization, and we have to look at that data and see what makes sense, especially given the fact that we're talking about coming out of the pandemic and we're talking about being fiscally responsible. But the other thing that we have to do, a lot of times we implement these things and we don't have effective communication. We don't have input from communities, whether or not they even want the ferry service. I love the fact that in New York, we have so many various options of transportation and means to be able to get around. But we have to do what works for the majority of the people and what helps communities that are like in transportation deserts. Should we be utilizing those funds to assist those people to provide more buses and other options for them? So we have to look at the data and we have to understand whether or not that is the best bang for our buck in this moment. And maybe we look at the type of service that we provide, the timing as it relates to when we provide the service. But if it's not working, if we're operating at a loss, it doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Jocelyn. The next question is also a sort of de Blasio legacy question. I'm curious if you can tell me in 60 seconds or less what you would do about the BQE cantilever, which, as you know, cuts through Brooklyn Heights, supports the Brooklyn Promenade, and in a few years will no longer be able to support truck traffic. After first proposing it to rebuild it, the mayor backed off, punted to a panel, which effectively also punted its ultimate fate to another panel. So what would you do? Would you convene another panel? What would you do? And I guess we'll start with Eric this time.
There were some great designs, and I followed this closely. The original plan was a terrible idea and a terrible option. I believe we should take the entire region into account. A lot of focus was looking at how this would impact the Brooklyn Heights area, when in fact we should be looking at how it impacts going into the Bay Ridge, Sunset Park, and also heading into the Williamsburg area as well. And I would look at the using the space for a park space. How do we rethink the project? There were some excellent designs that I saw that talked about bringing it to ground level, expanding the roadway and use it for park space as well. And that's what I would look at doing.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Art, what would you do with the BQE cantilever?
Yeah, like Eric, I've been watching this closely, and I have to say I completely agree with Eric that this is clearly a case where the first design was done very top down, without the right level of community involvement, without thinking about the ancillary effects of things like construction and traffic routing during construction. But this is really a critical arterial roadway that does connect some of these major areas. And if we're thinking about preserving our industrial waterfront, we do have to think about a way for trucks to get from that industrial waterfront to other places within the city, for trucks that have distribution facilities down there to other places in the city. And so this should be a great opportunity to do things like build parkland, to include the communities in this. And to Eric's point, I think we should actually include this conversation, broaden this conversation to include some of the other communities that also are beneficiaries or are affected by the BQE.
Great. Thank you. Same question, Scott.
Well, I support the Stringer plan for the BQE. I worked with Brooklyn Heights residents and advocates and activists to come up with a forward-thinking plan to promote green space on top of the 3 cantilevers, to make that part of a multi-community plan. We reached out, we looked at engineering reports, we met with DOT, but they didn't understand that we could not build another superhighway because we had to replace the superhighway. So I would implement my plan working with the community. It's complicated. We need to align federal dollars, state dollars, and a whole lot of permits. But this is where my government experience comes in to actually land the plane. And lastly, let's not stop with the BQE. Let's look at the superhighways, the Cross Bronx that has divided communities, and so many highways that at least should be decked and created to make healthier neighborhoods. Right now, these superhighways are a relic of the Robert Moses era. It is time, as we think about transportation and transportation alternatives, to create a less of a car culture with superhighways and create transportation alternatives, but you don't build another superhighway for another superhighway. So please support the Stringer plan candidates. I will send it out tomorrow.
Thank you, Scott. And Jocelyn, same question.
Yeah, you know, I think it's great to have a plan that seems to, you know, want to enhance the Brooklyn Heights area and the BQE. But let me just say this, there are so many different areas in the communities in the city that are struggling with so many different things. And we tend to do a lot of things that are nice to have, but don't address the needs of the communities that we talk about all the time that are disproportionately affected. So I think that we need to first look at these communities and see what these needs are. And we have to stop doing things that are nice to have before we've addressed the needs of communities that we talk about and the disparities that we talk about in other communities. So, you know, while I understand, I've taken the BQE, I understand that we have to have an investment there. We have to invest in, you know, the infrastructure. I want to make sure, is this the most immediate need in this moment? I'm not sure that it is.
All right, thank you, Jocelyn. Our next question is going to come from Bria Baptiste. Bria is a student at Queens College, and she organizes bus riders with the Straphangers Campaign.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Bria Baptiste, as Dana introduced me. I live in Jamaica, Queens, and I'm a Queens College student and a member of the Straphangers Campaign. Buses are essential to our city, particularly in areas like Southeast Queens, where I live, where there are few trains but lots of buses. Personally, as a Queens College student, I would have no other way to get to class without buses since there are no subways near campus. Millions of New Yorkers' livelihoods depend on buses. But as every bus rider knows, taking the bus is slow, unreliable, and bus riders are often overlooked by those who have the power to make things better. How do you, as the next mayor, promise to make New York City's 2 million bus riders a priority? What will you do to push back against opposition to things that improve bus service like bus lanes?
Thanks, Bria. This one we'll do in reverse alphabetical order. Jocelyn.
Yes, I definitely support, especially in Queens. I mean, I used to work in Jamaica, so I know what the situation is out there in that area as it relates to being able to get around. I remember before when the E train wasn't even going, the E and the J train, they didn't even have that subway station. So that was a big thing when that came through. But we have to support these communities, and we have to ensure that we install more bus lanes. Especially even if we're going to do it between certain hours. Like I know over here on Nostrand Avenue, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 a.m., it's strictly bus lanes on both sides. There's no parking on the street. So we have to implement more of these type of things, especially at peak hours, to ensure that the community has accessibility to be able to get around. And we also have to make sure that we, support in ensuring there are times when, let's say like with the 14th Street, a bus lane service, where can we look at implementing that as well as, in communities in Queens as well?
Thanks, Jocelyn, and welcome, Catherine. I'll repeat the question for you in a second. But next up, Scott, same question.
Look, I have a 19-point plan to massively expand our bus routes and to make sure that they run on time. And part of the reason why is when I was a kid growing up in Washington Heights, if you were late for school, you couldn't take the bus. You would have to walk because you could walk faster than the bus. And nothing much has changed since then. So we need to have dedicated bus lanes. We need to ensure that we don't have obstruction through those lanes. That's a combination of green lighting and also enforcement. But we also have to recognize that rush hour has changed from the 70s and 80s. It used to be that people in the boroughs would do everything they could to get to Midtown Manhattan to work from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then get home by 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. to cook dinner. I don't know. And that has changed now. Students and young people, they're not working rush hour in Midtown Manhattan. They're working in Brooklyn. They're working in Queens. They're going to school at night. Frontline workers, they don't get home till 12 o'clock. There's no bus waiting for them. There's no bus to get you to where you have to go. In other words, the bus system is the most efficient way to recognize the new economy, recognize the 5-borough economy that we have, and then build a platform that's going to meet that need and that design. Also, let's face it, the MTA is in a tough spot. We're not going to have the kind of subway expansion that costs billions of dollars, but buses are easy to do. And lastly, there's an equity issue. The people who do the hard jobs in this city are the poorest people in the city, and they take the bus, and we should be delivering for them.
Thank you, Scott. Catherine, the question, I'm not sure if you heard it, so I'll just
Yeah, no, I appreciate you telling me.
It's, what would you do to improve bus service that, pre-pandemic carried 2.5 million riders, a disproportionate number of them lower income people of color. And as you know, bus lanes are often blocked by all sorts of vehicles. They're often just paint on the ground.
Oh, so I mean, not only are they essential workers, they're often usually older workers. There are several pieces to my plan. One is expanding select bus service, also expanding express service as well. But we have to have real protected bike lanes that can't be blocked. Just as you need protected bus lanes, even as we do protected bike lanes. So you don't end up having every UPS and FedEx truck and Amazon delivery truck in the bus lane. We also need to make sure that there's enforcement and that people stay out of the bus lanes, and we can use technology. We know that there is technology right now that needs to be expanded to many other boroughs that turns the light green so that the bus can continue to go. This is what makes your commute faster. And we know New Yorkers are all about getting places on time. They choose mass transit not only because it is the cheapest way to go, but it's also because it actually gets you there faster often than a car.
Thank you. Who's next? Art, what would you do to improve bus service?
So as mayor, I would start with having a citywide planning process so that we ensure that we have buses where they're needed. We need express buses so that Bria can take her bus from Jamaica to Queens College, which is a trek. Our current subway system is designed in a hub and spokes. But as we know from the growth in Lyft and Uber, that so many more trips are happening across those spokes. So we need to do the same thing. And by the way, why are the traditional buses the only way we can do this? As I mentioned in response to an earlier question, London has been experimenting with flexible bus routes that operate more like share a taxi type of service. And so folks who actually don't live near a bus lane, express bus lane, need a different way to be able to get access. And then finally, I'd say that Dana, that the New York Times has done some amazing work showing how you can map cell phone traffic across different cities. And there's no reason why the city shouldn't be using that to actually find out how people are actually commuting. So we have a baseline, and then we orient the buses, because they are the most flexible solution, to those places. And then we can use technology to be able to make it easier for people to get those buses and know where they're coming from.
Great, thank you, Art. Eric, same question. How would you improve bus service?
Thank you very much. And I must apologize. I have to depart after this. Bria, I am not the choir. I wrote the song. I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens. I had to take 2 buses to get to the subway station. And I was bused to Bayside High School, the Q31. I remember so clearly. And so we need to invest in our rapid bus systems. And this is something we can do as a city. This is an opportunity to expand our bus services as the 5 borough presidents came together to get an additional 40 miles of busways. We were only successful in 20 miles. And last month, we also put out a call of action for 30 new miles by the end of 2021. So we hear you and we understand that this is the best way to improve our system. And I'm all in. I'm a MetroCard user, and I know how important it is to have great bus service. Thank you for that question. And to my colleagues, I'm sorry I have to hop off, but have a safe evening.
Thank you.
I think you're going where I just came from, Eric.
So this will be our last question before the lightning round. It's been 14 years since the first green painted bike lane arrived in New York City. Last year, the Surface Transit Advisory Council that the mayor convened, but whose recommendations he never implemented, recommended bicycle superhighways to move more New Yorkers across the city. How do you envision bike lanes that don't just replicate our current bike lane standard? What would a, Garcia, Stringer, Chang, Taylor, I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, apologies, administration bike lane look like? And we will start this time with Art.
As I mentioned earlier, we would appoint a director of the public realm who would think very differently about our streetscapes and returning the streets back to the people. Bikes are an intrinsic use. One thing that we've seen from COVID is an explosion in bike ridership. Before COVID, we had bicycle traffic jams on many of our green painted bike lanes. Today, it's even worse. And we need to have protected bike lanes. And then we also need to accommodate all the other forms of micromodal innovations that are happening on our streets. And we need to do that in conjunction with quieting the streets so that they become safer, and especially for folks who are disabled and elderly. So we have a lot of things that we need to do for that. I am a big fan of the RPA's plan for a 5-borough bikeway. I think that is the most ambitious and the right way to go. It is based on the best practices from Europe, and I'm totally in support. I was a contributor to the 4th regional plan, and am a big supporter of what they've done.
Thank you, Art. Catherine, same question. What would a Garcia administration bike lane look like?
I have committed to 250 miles of really protected bike lanes. It can't just be paint on the street. You have to physically separate the biker and the car. because we can't just depend on driver behavior to keep people safe. And it's not only about our commuters and our recreational bikers. There are a tremendous number of essential workers who've been delivering your sushi and delivering your Amazon package on a bike. They are in those bike lanes. They deserve to be protected. But this is about reimagining the public realm and how we are using our public spaces and ensuring that our public spaces are for the public.
Thank you. Scott, same question.
I really do think we can build 350 miles of bike lanes in 5 years. And as part of my plan, I would make sure that every high school student in this city could get a free city bike. But the key is a bike that drives through very protected bike lanes. We have to separate pedestrians and cars. And there's technology that can do that. It just means will and planning. I also think that when we think about safety, again, I cannot stress how much we have to think about a lot of these streetscape proposals through the lens of keeping children and seniors safe. There's a wonderful sign on the Brooklyn Bridge when you come over the Brooklyn Bridge, and at least it was there for many years. And I really felt something because I was a young parent or a new parent, I was never a young parent. And there was a sign that said, be careful, my daddy works here. And I think the mission of the DOT and the next mayor has to be, be careful with design because my kid's gonna ride here. And that is something that I think parents who've lost loved ones and all of us feel is the #1 priority.
Thanks, Scott. Jocelyn, same question.
Yes, listen, I love the fact that a lot more people are getting around the city via bicycle. But one of the things that I've seen is that the lanes as they've been designed right now, some of them are not safe. I think that we need to have, my plan is to have more community involvement in the design and where we put the lanes before we start putting the lanes in. And, education for people in regards to the value add in us, using bicycles as a means of transportation, because I think that that's important as well. Safety is truly key, but I also feel like we need to do more public service announcements about bike safety, because we do have a lot more bikes on the road in this moment. And we've never really taken a step back and talked about how cars and bikes should be interacting with each other. When I think for myself, listen, I've got my license back in the 80s, right? You don't remember that stuff from back then. We have to re-educate people as it relates to what it looks like when we have bikes on the lanes now, because we have a lot more bicycles. I don't think it's going anywhere, but I think, under my administration, we're going to have a lot more community involvement as it relates to where we put the lanes and a lot more communication about bike safety.
Thank you. All right, so finally, our lightning round. These are designed to be basically yes or no questions. And the first one, and I guess we're doing alphabetical art. Will you commit to commuting to City Hall by subway, bus, or bike? Yes or no?
Yes, 100%.
Catherine?
Yes, our train.
Scott?
Yes.
Jocelyn?
Yes, train.
Train. Do you support lowering the citywide speed limit to 20 miles an hour? Art?
Yes.
Catherine?
No.
No. Scott?
Yes.
And Jocelyn?
I would say no. I think 25 is good. I think we have to have more effective communication about safety.
All right, next one. Name your favorite bus line, Catherine.
The B63.
Sorry. All right. All right, sorry.
Q41.
Scott.
M104.
And Jocelyn.
Well, I take the 25 or the 26.
Next, the BQX, the light rail proposal that the next mayor will have to determine the fate of. Would you keep working on it or cut bait? Art?
Revisit completely. Cut bait.
Oh, okay. Catherine?
Revisit, cut bait, and it's not going anywhere.
Okay, Scott?
Ditto.
And Jocelyn?
Yeah, I would have to say cut bait. We have to address the needs of the city before we address things that are nice to have.
Next one, should the transit system have more NYPD officers, the same number, or fewer? Art.
Fewer, and they should be replaced with a different kind of an officer without guns.
Catherine.
We need to make sure that we have enough officers so that people feel safe on the subway. They don't today, and that is why we still have low ridership.
So that would mean more, correct?
It would mean more right this moment, yes.
Got it. Scott.
Fewer, because what we really need below ground are mental health professionals, because the people who are in our subway system sleeping in the subway cars are people who have very serious mental health issues, and we should finally address it and not play to the crowd. We have got to get this under control.
And Jocelyn.
I think the policing is just a reaction to the other things that we haven't addressed, like Scott said, mental health and other issues. So it's more of an investment in those type of things and less investment in policing.
Okay. And the last one is, do you support eliminating minimum parking requirements from the zoning code? Art.
Yes.
Catherine.
No.
Scott.
Yes.
And Jocelyn.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us. This was fun.
Thank you,
Thank
Dana.
Thank you so much.
Lightning round, like what was like your, like what is your most random purchase in the last week, or
Sorry.
I'm trying to mix it up. I've done a lot of forums.
We answer yes.
What?
But yes or no.
Yes, it's yes or
on
no.
fun things.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, bye.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Dana.
so
Really
much,
appreciate
Dana.
your work on this.
Thank you,
And
Dana.
Thanks to all the sponsors.